Rattled by the U.S. economy and his prospects for re-election, an unsettled President Trump is stumbling through a week of self-induced chaos. Since Sunday, the president has picked stupid fights with an array of perceived adversaries. He ignited outrage by saying Jewish Americans are disloyal if they vote Democratic. He accused his enemies of conspiring against him to crash the U.S. economy. He's ginned up a fight with Denmark, of all countries, canceling a state visit there because it rebuffed his offer to buy Greenland. Is this the behavior of a level-headed leader? As the New York Times reports, some former Trump administration officials in recent days said they were increasingly worried about the president's behavior, suggesting it stems from rising pressure on Mr. Trump as the economy seems more worrisome and next year's election approaches. That may explain why the president went off into la-la land during a 35-minute Q&A with reporters yesterday. Among other things, the president called the Prime Minister of Denmark nasty. He contradicted himself on gun safety measures, and he defended his accusation that Jewish Democrats are disloyal. Well, the president's changing stance on whether to soup up the economy only added to the confusion this week. On Tuesday, Trump said he was considering a payroll tax cut to boost the economy, only to rule it out 24 hours later.
Payroll tax is something that we think about, and a lot of people would like to see that, and that very much affects the workers of our country.
We see a payroll tax cut, which is aimed at
I'm not looking at a tax cut now. We don't need it.
Wow. Equally confounding is that at the same time Trump attacks Jewish Americans for voting Democratic, he's become flummoxed that they are not lining up to support his reelection. That's according to the Washington Post, which reports that Trump believes his support for Israel should automatically translate into electoral support from Jewish Americans. Meanwhile, according to a new poll by the Associated Press, the president's approval rating has ticked down slightly to 36% now, with 62% of Americans disapproving. 3 out of 5, more than 3 out of 5, don't like his presidency. I'm joined right now by former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards of Maryland, Sam Stein, politics editor of the Daily Beast, Ron Reagan. Welcome back, Ron, is author and political commentator. And Susan Del Percio is a Republican strategist. Ron, just in from Italy, I assume, as always. Let me ask you this. What have you missed? Have you noticed the strange oddity of this? Crotchety is my word for it. Irritable would be a good old sort of a sterile word. Crotchety is my favorite. He wants to fight with everybody, including the quiet, American-loving Danes. What's up?
Well, it's craziness, but I take a little umbrage at this idea that we have to ascribe it to something like the economy or his anxiousness about re-election. He's acting the way he's acting because he is who he is and what he is. And we've got to stop being surprised about any of this kind of stuff. It's only going to get worse as we get closer to the election and more pressure mounts on him. Look, the economy may be heading into a recession. That puts pressure on a president. Well, you know what Truman said about heat and kitchens. The presidency is full of pressure. If this is enough to push him over the edge, really, let me state the obvious, he does not belong in this office.
I'm going to argue with Ron for the first time in a couple of months here because it is. I think going to war with Denmark is still frickin' news. I'm sorry. It still makes my list. This is a president. It's like a Mel Brooks movie. I mean, what? I'm sorry. I'll go back to you, Ron. Why do you think it's okay, or this sort of fits the normal pattern of our lives now?
Well, it's not that it's okay.
He wants to go to war over Greenland. If you wrote this as a script in Hollywood, no one would buy it.
No, it's not that it's okay. It's just that it's normal for him. I mean, yes, this is completely crazy. Of course, buying Greenland, like it's a chunk of Manhattan real estate or something you can, pick up for a song. But every time I come on the show when I get back from Europe, we have a discussion about how crazy Donald Trump has been while I've been gone. I think it's about time we just acknowledge that he's been crazy because he is crazy. And it's just going to keep going.
But if we were in a hospital and we were a good nurse or doctor, we would have a chart. on a very strong diagonal line heading up skyward in the craziness department.
There's a trend line. I agree.
Let me go to Susan, because Susan, I just noticed reading one of the magazines I read, like Variety, that James Cagney's 50-acre estate up on Martha's Vineyard's for sale. That's what Trump should be looking at. Is Ron's right? He shouldn't be looking at Greenland. He should, prime real estate, retirement real estate, and Martha's Vineyard is what he ought to be looking at. Your thoughts?
No, you're absolutely right, Chris. The president, now, I am not a doctor, so I'm not going to go into his mental health and where he may be, but this is a president who is acting as he always has. He's scared. He gets defensive. He is not a leader. No one ever follows him. He may give orders and people may follow them, but they're not inspired by him. He's living in a land where only sycophants survive. That's all he has around him. And that, plus the economy, plus the poll numbers that are coming out against him, he's nothing more than a frightened child who just has a lot of dangerous things he can do.
Do you have that from the inside? The kind of people who sit in the office with him, when he comes out with these Zano ideas, do people shake their heads and go and get in the other room and talk about him, or what is the humanity like around him? People with brains.
Well, from what I hear, people just try and keep their head down, and the ones I know of just try and get their jobs done and not let him cause damage. But there's also those who are enablers. And, let's not forget, Donald Trump's not...
Mick Mulvaney.
Well, he doesn't even do anything. I wish he would do something. He just lets Trump be Trump and let him make his phone calls to people, and call his friend Jim, whoever that is, and get opinions.
Harvey the rabbit, for all we know.
For all we know. So that's where we are.
Okay, let me get it done on this. You're a politician. First of all, the Jewish community, generally, since I was born, is basically Democratic, going back to the FDR times. They're New Deal Democrats, generally. They are. They are just socially liberal, blah, blah, blah. Trump thinks he can buy them by moving the embassy. Look at what he's doing. He's like, and how come they're not being bought? It's all transactional with him now. He doesn't understand the acquisition mentality of his. I acquired your votes.
Right.
What gives here?
This is the thing. It is about a transaction. And so he's making the TikTok list of all the things that he's done. And darn it, why aren't you with me? It turns out that Jews, just like a whole bunch of other voters, don't just vote on one thing. They vote on a lot of things. And, when I think about, my own relationship with the Jewish community, actually, goes back to childhood, where Jews and blacks lived in the same neighborhoods. Because guess what? Couldn't live anyplace else. And so we lived together. Those sort of things. And he doesn't even factor any of that stuff in. It's not about history. It's not about relationships. It's all about, what did you do for me? Because this is what I did for you.
Yeah, what can I buy from you? Anyway, the New York Times also points out that after casting off advisors who displeased him at a record rate in his first 2.5 years in office, Mr. Trump now has fewer aides around him willing or able to challenge him, much less restrain his more impulsive instinct. You're an expert on this thing about, well, you are, because you know politics. And the Daily Beast knows all about this stuff, this intrigue. Yeah. Who's left that can say, Mr. President, I think you've lost it? Who's willing to say to him, are you sure?
Well, no one really. And this is partially because people have left and they haven't backfilled the positions. It's partially because Trump has evolved in the office.
Scaramucci was too sane for him. Think about the people that have left. These are not exactly buttoned down people.
So we didn't start at a great place either. But, when Trump did take office, he was humble to the degree that Donald Trump can be humbled.
Omarosa? These people are too restrained for him?
Mr. President.
He did have his generals.
He did have his generals, and they're gone. And I think
Mathis.
Increasingly, he is someone who feels like he needs to rely on his own advice. He's his best counsel. He's his best political advisor. Let me just say one thing, though. We talk a little bit about how his craziness is a vulnerability, and surely it is. But I don't necessarily think it's his number one vulnerability. I think exhaustion is. I think people are just tired of this. I think people are tired of this show. Yeah,
fatigue,
I think collective exhaustion with the.
Okay, let's go.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.